So for the first panel, I'd like to bring up Captain Matt Hayes. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everybody. So first one we're going to have this morning is our first responders and utilities, so I'm going to introduce them as they come up. So our first panelist is Chief Dehart, who is the City of Temecula Fire Chief. So Chief Dehart. Our second panelist is Chief Keeling from Pechanga Fire Department. He also wears the hat of Emergency Manager for the Pechanga Tribe. So welcome. Our third panelist from the City of Murrieta is Chief Jensen, Fire Marshal for Murrieta Fire Department. Right here, sir. Our fourth panelist is Lieutenant Novak from the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. He oversees the CERT program. Our fifth panelist is Sergeant Scholda from Riverside County Sheriff's Department, also on the CERT program. And our last guest today is Megan Valencia from the Public Affairs Coordinator for Riverside County, Rancho California Water District, so I get Riverside County in there. So our panel is brought together today. It's a wide blend of our groups down here in the Southwest communities to be able to explain some of their positions, what they do during an emergency, and kind of give you an idea what they're doing out there in the field when we're inside the building at the EOC trying to assist them. So Chief Dehart, explain your primary function and responsibilities during a large-scale emergency.
During a large-scale emergency, my primary function becomes the city liaison. So the incident commanders at a major incident, they have set objectives that they're going to establish and stuff like that. My overall responsibility becomes the public safety and the best interests of the city. So I make sure that I embed myself with them, but I don't take over incident command from them, but I make sure all the back end of the incident objectives are being met. So there's going to be a lot of little things that, liaison between environmental health and the particular scenario they have out here now is going to be a large scale, and it's going to become a technical issue with hazmats and evacuations and everything else. So my primary duties would be to make sure that all the back end moving parts are taking place like they're supposed to. Appropriate notifications, legal notifications, city notifications, all my public information notifications are done, and anything that could hamper that operation later on gets mitigated before we have any issues. So my primary duties would be to the overall observation and make sure that I'm liaison with the city and making sure the needs of the city, the public, the school district, all that stuff that's going to play out in this particular scenario are met.
Thank you, Chief. Chief Keeling, same question.
Yeah, my role is going to be simpler, as the chief said. I'm going to form as the liaison for our tribal council. I'm going to make sure, obviously, for us, what that impact looks like to our community and to our guests. We want to make sure that our council is being well informed, and we're supporting the needs of our first responders and our other agencies that are coming in from mutual aid to support us. Being a smaller department, we're going to have a lot of resources coming in to support us during an event of this size from the outside through our auto aid and mutual aid agreements. So my job would be to make sure that that's being facilitated and then that's being coordinated properly to help mitigate the incident. But like the chief said, my primary role is to ensure that our elected officials, both on our gaming side and our government side, are being well informed what the situation is at hand and how we're dealing with that and how we're protecting the community, both on the reservation and any of our guests that are on our property.
Thank you, Chief, and Chief Jensen.
Good morning. My role's just a little bit different from the chiefs there. My role would be to be the visionary person. I would probably go to the incident or be en route to the incident, looking at the different complexities where this incident may be going, and then working with our city staff to start establishing an EOC operation. Obviously, based on the scenario, this is a quite complex environment. It's dynamic, it's moving. Multiple agencies would be involved, so we would know that the Emergency Operations Center would be key to that. I'd also have to know how to get a hold of Cindy quickly, because, and I didn't say her last name, I said quickly, because she's the one that sets up our EOC. So, but just being that visionary person, that link between the actual incident itself and where we're headed into the EOC, making sure that our fire chief is well aware factually of what's happening and where this incident may be going, and then responding to the Emergency Operations Center to begin to get that set up and functioning as an active EOC.
Thank you, Chief. We'll get to you there in a few minutes on the police scenario. So I'm not ignoring them, but we're going to stick with the fire department scenario. So this is fictitious, nowhere near anywhere here. So it's 2 p.m. on the hottest day of the year, Chief DeHart, and you receive a call that there are 3 dealerships adjacent to the freeway and across the street from elementary school that are on fire. School is currently in session. A protest group has claimed responsibility. Your question to you is what are your first 2 hours looking like?
So the first 2 hours of this particular incident, it's going to be very complex. So we obviously have a major crime that's taken place that's going to impact the schools. So the first 2 hours of this incident could be very ugly depending on what happens. Obviously, our first and foremost is going to be public safety is going to be our first task at hand. But the first 2 hours are going to be a lot of notifications going out. This is a very complex incident because there's a lot of hazardous materials involved. Air monitoring is going to be required. So there's going to be a lot of things that are going to take place with this incident. And my first 2 hours just coordinating and making sure my incident commanders are implementing policies, procedures, and getting the mutual aid and all the different agencies involved is going to be quite complex.
Thank you, Chief. Chief Keeling, so please explain your interactions and coordinations with the other first responders, volunteer groups, et cetera, during this emergency.
Yeah, it's important that we coordinate the incoming resources appropriately for an incident like this. Like Chief said, there's a lot of dynamics here. We've got a school that's nearby. We have the air quality concerns. We've got these special groups that are coming in to assist us and partners. We need to make sure that's an organized action, that they understand what their need is, and to keep them out of harm's way as well. But at the same time, we're going to need that partnership assistance because we've got the school to deal with the children. We need to make decisions as incident commanders whether we're sheltering those children in place or we're evacuating them. How are we notifying their families that they're safe? Things like that are going to be very important for us as incident commanders to make sure the community is well informed of the emergency. At the same time, we have an emergency to mitigate here with, like the Chief said, with multiple resources. This would circumference a lot of different resources and agencies that we would have to coordinate through the incident command system that we would form and put together to coordinate that.
Thank you, Chief. So our last question, Chief Jensen, is how would you communicate with the updates to the public?
Well, I think we've all learned a lot of lessons, even just in the past few months, on how we communicate with the public and the use of social media sites and the challenges that come from that. In the first 2 hours, obviously, be coordinating any messages that would be going out to the public, either through our local media, our AM radio stations, as well as our social media sites. And obviously, with this being a multi-agency, we're wanting to give factual information, but I think it's getting timely information to the public to let them know that an incident has occurred. We are at scene, we are managing that incident, and then taking it to the next step to ensure that they're getting information relevant to the critical needs. We obviously have a school in close proximity. We're going to have parents surrounding the incident rather quickly, could be involved in the incident as potential victims. So there's a lot of things to think about when we're communicating. I think the biggest thing is to coordinate that communication effort with the agencies that are immediately involved in the incident and ensure we're giving accurate, factual, and timely information. So establishing a press release or a media release time so the media knows when and where to go, and then working on our social media sites. And I heard it most recently in a discussion with other emergency managers about the complexities of social media and the amount of characters that you're allowed to put in there, and how do you send the correct message. So it's quite challenging, but I think it's also something that working together cooperatively with all those agencies involved and getting the factual and timely information to the public keeps them at ease as to what's actually happening.
Perfect. Thank you, Chief. There we go. Thank you, Chief. All right, so we're going to move into the law enforcement component on the scenario here. So, Sergeant Scholda, what are your primary functions and responsibilities during a large-scale emergency?
Well, with the Sheriff's Emergency Response Team is responsible for responding to wildland fires, search and rescues, coordinating search and rescues, and also acting as a liaison with Cal OES, the Emergency Operations Center, and the Department Operations Center.
Perfect. Thank you, Sergeant. Lieutenant Novak, is there anything you would like to add
Sure.
with that?
We're also the mutual aid coordinators for law enforcement. So if there's a particular station, one of our patrol stations that's handling a large-scale emergency, and they need assistance, they need additional staff or personnel, we're able to coordinate that through the rest of our stations, bring those personnel bodies, that staffing to them. If it's not something that we can withstand within our own county, we're also the mutual aid coordinator for outside of our county. So we're able to reach out throughout the state to several different counties and bring in additional law enforcement resources to assist with that. Just like Sergeant Scholda said, we're the search and rescue coordinators as well throughout the county. And so we work a lot of times behind the scenes dealing with coordination efforts, reference search and rescue. So it really depends on the type of disaster that we're dealing with. We step in the picture and help fill the gap where that station needs assistance, either personnel, resources, whatever the case may be.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Sergeant Scholda, so the scenario is it's 10 a.m. on a beautiful Friday morning. You receive confirmed reports of multiple shots fired at a local high school. You receive additional reports of multiple casualties, and a gunman is on the loose. What do your first 2 hours look like?
This type of incident is going to draw a regional response from all local agencies. It's going to be chaotic at first. It's going to have to go into a unified command eventually, and all personnel and other key holders, stakeholders, like CAL FIRE, CHP, all allied agencies will be responding. The overriding essential goal of the department is to locate the suspects, isolate, and eliminate the threat.
Perfect, thank you. We'll keep with you, Sergeant, if you don't mind. Explain your interactions and coordinations with the first responders. I mean, I think you kind of went into that, but how does that, what's that involvement when you're dealing with them, you know, information-wise?
Well, during a large-scale event such as this active shooter, the unified command will come together and make decisions and communicate effectively and coordinate with other responders throughout the area that is responding to the incident, and have locations for these other agencies and to respond to and stage.
Perfect, thank you, Sergeant. Lieutenant, how do you communicate these updates to the public?
If I can, let me go back first to the first 2 hours.
Yeah, that would be great.
So the main thing for the Sheriff's Department regarding these, whether it's the primary station that's responding to this critical incident or the Sheriff's CERT team responding to assist with that incident, the main thing that we're going to be focused on is the protection of life. So if there's an issue, say it's an active shooter, we're going to locate that individual and we're going to stop the threat as best as we can. We're also going to move into the criminal investigation of that. And we're going to work with our EMS system, the firefighters, the paramedics responding in to deal with, obviously, the aftermath of that incident and render aid as much and quickly as possible. We're also going to be doing the coordination and collaboration effort with all the stakeholders involved in that particular incident. So it could be a school district, it could be the city council members, the city manager. If it's a terrorist-related event, you're going to be dealing with, obviously, the FBI coming in and assisting with that. So that's our main priority. And then as when it goes to communication with the public, I believe is your next question.
Correct.
We're going to be reaching out with their PIO group, our public information officer. The Sheriff's Department has PIOs. If this is going to be a mutual aid style an event, or we have multiple investigations from the federal side, the law enforcement side, even with the school districts, the fire department coming in, hospitals are going to be affected by this. We're going to end up having a joint information system, or either it be a virtual or an actual hard place. And we're going to be able to come in and sit down and deliver one solid message. This is where we're at with the investigation. This is what we know. This is how we're progressing with it. But it has to be vetted by all the people that are involved in that unified command. So that's all one consistent message. And we're going to get that out as timely as possible.
Perfect. Thank you, Lieutenant. So our third section here is utilities, and we, like I said, we have Rancho California Water District here to talk about some of their functions and needs during an emergency. So Megan Valencia, thank you for coming. Please describe your roles and responsibilities in your organization and for your organization.
So Rancho California Water District is the water agency that serves water to Temecula and then a portion of Murrieta and some unincorporated areas in Riverside County. We also are in charge of a small area in Murrieta for sewer, but the majority of sewer is done by Eastern Municipal Water District out here in Temecula. So our primary role as an agency is to make sure that we're serving, potable drinking water to the community with minimal interruptions, and when we do have those interruptions, to make sure that we respond quickly and make the repairs that we can. As far as my role at the agency, I do our outreach, and so when we deal with emergencies, I deal with the media, deal with communicating with the public, and then I also am in charge of legislative stuff at the district.
Perfect, thank you. So with public information in mind, and you're receiving a lot of calls in there, so let's talk about your roles and responsibilities about getting information out there. So I have a scenario here that it's we're in the midst of a routine work week, and you've been informed that there's a wildland fire up in the Duluth-La Cresta area, and it's heading towards Temecula, Murrieta. It's taken out the power lines, it's taken out a pumping station, and you're starting to receive phone calls. So tell me what information you're getting out there and how you're going to coordinate it with our emergency responders and EOC to get information out there that is timely and correct.
So with this type of scenario, very unlikely, hasn't been happening anytime lately. No.
Yes.
We've had this scenario lately, and it hasn't gotten too close, but we definitely have gone through the drills. And so it helps you for when this comes on, what are we really going to do? And first thing, especially with the power line, when we work operations, we have many generators, so we're gonna be moving generators over to that area to make sure that our pumping stations still work, that we can get them online. And we also make some operational changes where we move more water into our tanks. So we have different tanks in different areas, and we just want to make sure that we have additional water in those storage tanks so that for fighting the fire, there's more flow up there ready to go. And so those are operationally wise what we would do. As far as communication wise, we would be coordinating with the other agencies, the fire department, the police department, on different things, but we would not be communicating to the public, and except for the messages that the fire department is putting out and their phone numbers and everything else, because they're really going to be the lead in this. So we are making sure that they have the water that they need to fight the fire, and then we will be giving any information out to the public that they are giving and the phone numbers and different things, but we wouldn't have our own message out there.
Thank you. Is it typical for the water district to receive phone calls during this with complaints of delivery service, or is that an uncommon thing?
Yeah, it's rare. We don't. We do have questions sometimes of, is there enough water is more the questions that we get, but we don't get very many other type of complaints.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so what we're gonna do is, look, I can ask questions all day long, but it's you that have the questions for our first responders, our water district, and first responders on both sides. So we're gonna open this up to any questions that you might have for our panel and that be willing to ask. So just raise your hand, come up to the middle, and I'll hand you a mic and we'll come on up. So, sir. Should be on.
Thank you. Is the fire department the incident commander for all incidents, or does it depend on what the first situation arises? Because I was a little bit confused because it sounded like the fire departments were incident commanders for things and then the sheriff's department took the lead on other things. Is there one command structure, or does it vary by the incident?
There generally is one incident command structure that we all follow, but the jurisdiction that's responsible for that particular incident will become the incident commander, and that's where we go into unified command. So like an active shooter situation they were talking about, the sheriff's department or the local police department, whichever jurisdiction it is going to be that incident commander. And then us as the fire department are going to basically join them at the hip, and we're going to express our concerns of what we need to get done on our end and go into unified command with them, and we unified together solve that problem with both agencies and any other agency that's going to be involved with that particular incident. We may have 3 or 4 incident commanders, but the sheriff's department or the lead police agency is the ultimate incident commander, and we all work together to solve whatever issues we need for each agency.
I'd like to add in on that. For, say, a wireline fire, the fire department, they're the fire behavior specialists. I'm not even going to try to pretend that I know anything about fire, but when we go into a wireline fire area that's affecting a population, fire department's going to look at us and say, hey, this community right here, they're in danger. We need to evacuate that community. And it's our job for law enforcement to go and evacuate that community. So we have to work hand in hand together in a unified command setting. So the fire department's going to basically dictate to us in that aspect what we should be doing law enforcement for our individual. You got to remember, disasters can be all different types, man-made, natural-made, that you have to look at each public safety's various disciplines. So in law enforcement, we handle criminal matters. Firefighters, they handle fire. They have a wide range of different specialties. So it really depends on who has the specialty and the authority over that particular incident. And that's going to drive who's basically in charge. Hopefully that answers.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Anybody else? Sir.
Good morning. I know, Rob, you and I discussed this a little while ago, but I think it's an interesting topic. Recently, we had multiple emergencies going on at the same time. Does the Riverside County Sheriff's Department have any plans in place to be able to maximize CERT's incident management ability to respond to multiple emergencies simultaneously throughout the county?
Are you asking for personnel-wise, or?
As far as incident management, like we talked about a little while ago.
Okay, so 2 or 3 different incidents occurring across the county.
Obviously, you guys can't respond to all of them. So you guys have like a...
So out of our particular unit, the Sheriff's Emergency Response Team? Okay. So currently, yes, we have plans. We have, Sergeant Schultz and I, we have about a 4 to 5 man team, depending on on staffing levels at the time, budget cuts. Not that I'll get into that. We're going to come out and assist those primary stations that jurisdiction falls in. So that if that disaster is happening in, say, the city of Temecula has a contract with the Sheriff's Department. But if it exceeds the capability of that, we're going to draw in resources from other stations to assist with that. If they're looking for expertise or management, something to where there's a particular asset that we can provide some emergency management capabilities. We have individuals across the county that are trained up almost equally as us. It's few in numbers at the moment. The Sheriff's Department's currently drafting a department directive. It's going to mandate each patrol station, each jail to have a minimum of a sergeant and lieutenant trained up to our capacity. And that way, when you have multiple incidents occur across the county, it's not just 2 or 4 of us responding in to assist that individual station with emergency management. We are able to pull those individuals across the county and assist in those different disaster scenarios. Hopefully that answers your question, Sam.
Lieutenant, off of that, how does volunteerism come into play with that, given your current staffing levels?
Volunteers for search and rescue, or just assisting us in
Assisting
general?
the CERT program.
So we have different types of search and rescue, or we have different types of volunteers. We have search and rescue-based volunteers that assist a lot of our rural search and rescue areas, which is also one of our realms. We also have volunteers that come in and help us move assets across the county. We have mobile command posts, we have generators, we have just various different things that are utilized in emergency management. They come in and assist with that. They also come in and assist with our incident command system planning, or paperwork, if you will, and then just general expertise. We recently acquired a volunteer. He served time, He that way. He worked at the Pentagon for emergency management. He also worked at the White House for emergency management. So, and he happened to be previous working relationship with our sheriff, I believe, if I remember correctly, the history behind it. And he recently went through our background investigation process, and he just came to us for the first time last week. So he has emergency management federal credentials. That's definitely an asset that I want working hand in hand with us so that we can maximize our effort when it comes to these multiple disasters.
Perfect, thank you. Who's next? Michael.
I really don't need one of these, but I'll go ahead and use it because
So
Robert
they can
wants me
pick up
to.
on it. Here.
Okay, my question is for the group at large. Taking my role out and just making myself as a resident, I live over in the Wolf Creek side of the house. Let's say we have an earthquake large enough to damage the 3 bridges that provide access to Wolf Creek and Red Hawk. Knowing that we only have 1 fire station over there and then the tribe as well, is there a plan within the city to provide additional resources if possible to help that area, since we would essentially be secluded off from the rest of the city due to the ability to get across the riverbed?
Well, I'll break it into 2 questions. We'll talk about the fire response and then PD response if you guys want to. But Chief, who wants this one? Chief Keeling, let's go with you.
Well, I guess if the bridges are out, we're going to be limited to the resources we have, unless we have the ability to have access coming out of San Diego. We have auto aid mutual aid agreements through that interact throughout our counties. So we would probably at that point look at what resources we could pull in from the San Diego County area to assist with what's needed. Then I'm sure that there's some plans in place for us for limitation. This incident's actually occurred to members of Riverside County and Pachanga during the floods many years ago that washed out the bridge there and isolated our communities there for about a little over a week and a half, so about 10 days. What we were able to do is get some resources, cut in a new road, access point to that community, put resources and emergency responders in that community, basically just tending out for emergency response in that area, and then we were able to get supplies into those folks as well, food, water, medical supplies, whatever was needed. So we do have plans in place, and we can get resources and supplies to those areas if needed, but it obviously access for fire engines, ambulances, things like that would be something we would have to coordinate with our other jurisdictions and find other access points. Or, as I said, we'll probably make those access points ourselves if needed.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about mutual aid is, you know, if we can't drive there, we'll fly there. So there are plans in place to deal with stuff, but it's just like any other incident. That's not going to be the only community affected. So they're going to be prioritized by the immediate life danger and what needs to be mitigated first. So, but we do have plans in place to utilize air resources or whatever we have to do to get the citizens the help they need.
All right, Lieutenant, is there anything you would like to add, or Sergeant? Okay, thank you. Next question.
I have a question with, we'll say, two parts. One is a simple one, and Chief DeHart, you kind of started with it, is the hazmat people. Is that a subgroup of the fire department, or is that a separate department? Then I'll give you my second question. I see fire department and I see police department, but I also see representatives here from emergency management. That's a more complicated question is, what is their role? Would they be subservient or a partner with the fire department or the police department, or do they take over the overall program if there's a major type incident?
Well, Chief, will answer the first part. Get to your second part there.
So the hazmat team is comprised of multiple agencies. So the fire department operates the operational component of the hazmat team, which would be the actual hazardous material team themselves, be the entry folks. They're trained at containment, damming, diking, air analyzing, all that other stuff. And then your environmental health comes in. They work hand in hand with them on every incident to make sure the environmental portion and any of the federal regulations and stuff are being met.
Maybe a next question related to that. So the fire department would remain still the incident commander, or would it transfer?
No, we would remain incident commander.
Second question was about the role of EMD.
Actually, why don't we bring Jerry up and Jerry can explain their exact role from them. But as far as they're concerned, again, they usually come in and go unified command with us, and they handle a lot of the back end on the support side. And Jerry?
As far as emergency management goes, what people must have to realize is that we are not a tactical agency. We don't decide tactics. We don't make decisions on how an incident is going to be mitigated. We leave that to fire, law, hazmat, the professionals that are trained in that. We're an overall management agency, and we come into play on large incidents. Let's say we have well, let's just use our favorite. We have a large wildland fire. We've got multiple fire agencies, and maybe we've got fires in multiple places. Example, we had the Cranston fire burning, and just as that was winding down, we had the Holy fire spin up. So we've got two major incidents going on, separate incidents with separate command teams running them, but everybody's looking for the same assets. That's where we come in through the county's emergency operations center. We're the ones that start allocating those assets. You know, if Fire A needs support for sleeping facilities for 5 days for their firefighters, and Fire B maybe needs it for 10 days, well, we're the ones that go out and find those things and get them put in place. So we do take a support role. Lately here in Riverside County, on several incidents, what we do is become so integrated through mass care and shelter, working very closely with the Sheriff's Department for the alert and warning and the evacuation piece. We're in the field with them, and we, on several occasions, have actually been brought into unified command to help make those decisions. Normally, we act in a support and liaison role, but again, so now we're starting to step in more into the command role. So does that answer your question? And we are a separate agency. So we're our own department.
Thank you, Jerry. So here's what we're going to do. Any other questions? Barring any, let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break, visit the vendors, get some coffee. The bathrooms are right back there. We'll meet back here at 9:45. We'll put our tickets in and have a drawing or two, and then we'll move on to our next panel. On behalf of the City of Temecula, to our panel members, thank you very much for your attendance, and hopefully you enjoy the rest of it, so thank you.